All right. Well, good afternoon, at least here, my friends, and thank you for coming today. You indeed are brave because we do have a guest with us today. That is Dave Gelman, a friend and coworker of mine. He is the Vice President of Advancement here at Crossroads. So he'll be speaking for a little bit today, and it's just been fun offering you an opportunity to get to know different facets of the ministry and those that are tied to those different pieces. So he'll be sharing his portion today. But at first, I'm just going to go over some updates. If you've been listening or reading any of our things, our office has been remained closed. It continues to be closed. Our doors are locked, though we've been able to add more staff, to the office to do their work instead of from home. But we will continue to evaluate that. Many of us are still at home. As you can see, you're in my home and welcome here. And so we're just anxiously anticipating what the future will bring. There's just so much uncertainty in this world that it's really hard to think so far ahead when we're so often living day to day with the different things going on in our country. But with that, I'm hopeful, and I remain hopeful this will stay true, is that you have not had any interruptions in your ministry, any interruptions in the lessons that you receive. And we've been very thankful that we've been able to continue that. And it's really only because our organization is really volunteer-led. We are very careful on how many staff that we employ, because we want to honor those that you give, the monies that you give. And through this COVID crisis, I wrote down a few numbers. We've had 20 office volunteers, 20 folks that continue to make that whole lesson processing in those different pieces. They've been volunteering from home to help make this work. And within our own department, the mentoring department, we've had 20, 25 people doing different things to help make everything run as smoothly as it has. So if you're one of those mentors, thank you. And we couldn't do this without you. This past June 30, I think it was 30 or 31st, was the end of our fiscal year. Our calendar year runs summer to summer. And I know Dave's going to give you some updates on where we landed, but I just want to talk to you a bit about the mentors. We landed with 521 new mentors for this year, 521. That is just an unbelievable number. I especially think along the lines of that's 521 people that are serving those behind prison walls, those that society just wants to really forget. And, society says they get what they deserve and then just forgets about them. Yet they have taken that step, most likely from one of you sharing your story, pricking their hearts for them to take that next step. So that 521, for us, we just had a little piece of it. We do the logistical piece. The work really comes from you as mentors, again, sharing your story. We begun enrolling new students, and we're very thankful for that because we had to stop that for a period of time. For some of you, we had to say, hey, can you only do one tier one student a week for a period of time? And so our hope is that for those of you that had been doing, 2 or 3 or even 4 tier 1 students every week, hopefully we can get back to that sometime in the near future, and we'll keep you advised on how that's going. And then lastly, I wanted to share that I'm in regular discussions with different prison ministries across the country, and have had the opportunity to listen in on different international calls with our extension sites, with prisons in other countries. And the story remains the same, that the prisons are closed to volunteers coming in, They're closed to some of our extension sites that serve the prisons. They aren't able to get in. And even probably what breaks my heart the most is that family members and loved ones are not able to visit those that are incarcerated anywhere here in the States and really any country. In fact, yes, a couple of days ago, I was talking to a group from Texas, and Texas is having a very difficult time with the pandemic right now. And the head chaplain of all the prisons there has absolutely no timeline when family or prison volunteers can come in. So I just ask that you be in prayer over that. I ask that you be in prayer over our international extension sites, which Dave's going to talk to us a little bit about, that they can resume their ministry in a timely way. And so thank you for that. So I'm going to shift it over to Dave. Dave, thank you for being here. And you go ahead.
All right. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's always fun when we have a chance to connect with our mentors and have a chance to share more about what's going on at Crossroads with all of you. Alicia, can you give me screen sharing rights so I can throw my PowerPoint up, please? I'm disabled from sharing at the moment. While she's working on that, I want to thank all of you from all of us here in the office for what you do. Some of you may have heard me say this before from time to time, but the ministry of Crossroads is not in reality here in our building. It's not Doug or I or Alicia or Joni. It's all of you who are the ministry of Crossroads. So when I have a chance to have a few minutes to share an update, it's really sharing what you all have been up to and what the impact looks like from a broader view than you get to see on a regular daily basis. So Doug mentioned a couple of minutes ago that we've just finished our fiscal year. And what I want to do is be able to give you a little bit of an update to say, okay, here's what it looked like last year and what the total of all those results sort of look like as we look at the big picture of what happened and what we get to celebrate at a certain level. My job here at Crossroads as Vice President for Advancement includes our marketing and our communications that we regularly send out to folks like you, to our supporters, to our churches. So I get to be part of developing all of those communications pieces that you see. So when you get a newsletter in your box, when you get threads in your box, those things come from the team that I get to lead here at Crossroads. I'm also responsible for the fundraising efforts here. So we're going to talk about where we wound up financially for the year in a couple of minutes. So you get a little bit of a report on that. And those are a real privilege for me to be part of what God is doing through Crossroads. So I'm going to jump right into some statistics. Can everybody see the slide on the screen? Give me a nod if you can see that. All right, great, thank you. So if I can get it to move, there we go. Here are some of the key statistics or measures of what happened last year at Crossroads. And the big one that we always like to talk about is our students. The number of students that participated in Crossroads last year is just over 30,000, almost 31,000 students last year. And that's a wonderful number. Doug mentioned that we actually stopped processing enrollments for a portion of the time that we were dealing with the pandemic, and we had a very limited staff here in the office. So that number would have been even higher. So we have, that's an increase of almost 5.5% over the prior year. So we continue to see growth in the number of students who are participating in the program. And that's incredibly positive. We're really, really pleased with that number and the way that it looks this year. That represents 2,219 facilities where those students are residents at this point. You see all kinds of addresses when you guys are mailing those things out, and you know that they're all over the place. I'll show you a map in just a second that gives you a little bit of a picture of that. But we have facilities that are state prisons, federal prisons, private prisons, county jails, military prisons, all over the place. So there's all kinds of places where those students reside. All of you are part of this next statistic. 3,206 mentors were part of Crossroads last year. So those are representative of any mentor who did at least one lesson during the year last year. That's 3,206 of you. And you all are just an amazing gift to us, and we're so grateful that you're part of what happens through Crossroads. So that's a great number for us. Doug mentioned more than 500 new mentors last year. The other part of that picture is that every year there's a number of mentors who leave for a number of reasons. Some of those may be, frankly, because they passed away. Some of those are because people had to stop for a while because of something going on in their life, had to care for a loved one, moved to a place where they weren't able to keep up with us. So the sort of what we might call the churn, the in and out of mentors last year, the net was a really positive number, just over 100 net increase. But every year there's a number who leave for some reason. So continue sharing the story so that we can keep gaining, keep getting positive, and help us to continue to sharing with new people who can join us and being part of what you do for Crossroads. I told you I'd show you the map. This is where the facilities are, where our students are. And this is kind of an exciting thing for us to put up on the screen for a number of reasons. First of all, you can see that we have the entire country covered and all corners of this map, which is a pretty neat thing for us to look at. I always like to point out to people, if you look at this map, the corners are covered, which is pretty neat. We're all the way down in Puerto Rico in the bottom right there, bottom left out in Hawaii, top left, you can just barely see Alaska peeking through above the banner up there. So we're all over the place where you are interacting and mentoring students, and it's a really exciting thing to see the breadth and the expanse of where students come to Crossroads from. A couple of other really neat numbers I'd like to share. Bibles. Every year we get thousands and thousands of requests for Bibles. This year our number is up pretty significantly over the prior year. Over 9,000 students received a Bible from Crossroads last year, which is a tremendous thing to say they have their own copy in their hands to interact with you, to interact with their lessons, to study God's Word in their cell or wherever they're at on their own time, able to do that with their own personal copy of the Word. The middle panel there, 115,000 letters of hope sent to men and women in prison. So what that means is we received back to our building here last year about 119,000 lessons. There's always a group of those that were unable to forward because they needed to be handled here in the facility. So there's 115,000 of those that came back to all of you. And when you had a chance to interact with them and send your letter back along with that lesson and encourage folks with your correspondence, that was 115,000 of those last year, which is just a tremendous number. We're incredibly grateful for the ministry that happened through that correspondence. Internationally, we add on to the numbers that I just shared with you. There's another 133,000 lessons that we send from our building here in Grand Rapids to our 23 extension centers all over the globe. And here's the map of where those extension centers are located. So you may have caught that number was 22 last year. Not on this map yet is Nepal, where we've just started a relationship with a pastor there who's beginning to minister to men and women in a prison there. So that's our 23rd extension center. There's more than 30 other locations all over the world where we've had requests from other places where we're not able to serve yet. So we'd be grateful if you'd continue praying with us about where God's calling us to become involved with additional extension centers coming up as we look forward into the future. This map represents more than 6,500 students in large and small locations all over. The largest of those extension centers are Canada and Australia right now. There's some really small ones like Pakistan, where there's a small group of people who have recently returned from prison who are being ministered to. So there's a great diversity in the body of people who are being ministered to all over the world. Now, part of my responsibility here at Crossroads is reporting back to folks who are supporting our organization and telling them about the results of their giving and their support. Frequently, what I get questions on is the next couple of slides I want to share with you. I get questions that say, so how do you spend money? How much of it goes to program? How much of it are you spending on other kinds of things? And then the second thing people always ask me is, well, where does the funding come from? What kinds of supporters do you have? So I'll answer those two questions with you over the next few minutes. First, our expenses are grouped into three categories for reporting here. The one everybody wants to know, they say, okay, how much of what we contribute goes to our program? And I'm really, really pleased with this number. 81.5% is what we've been reporting as our program expenses, which is really positive. Very, very pleased with that. That means the majority of what is contributed to us is going back into expenses that are directly related to program expenses. There's a lot of administrative costs that are wrapped up in running the kind of organization and structure that we do. That's about 9.5%, 9.4% right now, which is a pretty good number. We're pretty pleased with where that is. And then raising the funds that go back into supporting the organization is about 9.1% right now, which is a really good number. We're pleased with how that actually sits at this point in time, that is an appropriate and healthy level that goes back into developing more funds to continue supporting and growing the organization. So where does the funding come from? The largest portion of our funds comes from people like you, individuals who are giving sacrificially and generously to the organization, from very small contributions to some fairly large contributions. We have people on all ranges in that spectrum, and we're incredibly grateful for each of those gifts, for each of you who've been part of that. I would expect that on a gathering like this, there's a whole lot of people who've been part of giving and supporting Crossroads, so I want to stop and say thank you. What you do in writing a check or making an online contribution is deeply appreciated. It's critically important to us as an organization to have contributions people like you, so we're grateful for that. The other large portions of our income come from foundations, which this year is about $615,000. There's large and small ones there as well. Our international program is strongly supported by a couple of specific foundations who give very large grants to help us in continuing to run our program internationally. Churches. This year was an unusual one for us with churches because when COVID really came on strong and churches had to really shut down a lot of their worship services, collections obviously were impacted pretty dramatically. So a lot of churches slowed down on supporting organizations like ours. So the last quarter of our year, we saw a pretty substantial drop off in church contributions. So we're watching that very closely, trying to understand what our expectations can be for the churches who normally are committed to Crossroads over the coming year. So we're watching that real closely. Estates might be an unusual word for some of you. You might also hear that referred to as legacy giving or planned gifts. And what that means in practical terms is folks who give gifts either after they've deceased and their will or their estate is settled, that they made a bequest in their will to remember Crossroads after they left. There's also some non-traditional gifts that come into us that are through channels that we would call legacy giving or planned gifts. So this past year, we received one of the largest gifts that we've ever received from an estate, and it was from the estate of a former mentor who passed away about 1.5 years ago. And as her estate was settled this last year, we received a $94,000 check from the estate of a former mentor like many of you, which is just an incredible delight for us that the family of that person said, our mom loved Crossroads and loved her students so much that she, in her will, asked us to make sure that Crossroads received this gift, and we're delighted to share it with you. And we're just so thrilled when we see those kinds of reports that say somebody's passion for what they did for Crossroads while they were alive continues to give back after they've passed away. So it's a really neat thing when we get to see those things happen after somebody is gone. So those are the large categories of where our income typically comes from during a year. We finished this fiscal year in a healthy financial position. We were relieved and pleased and thankful that God continued to move in the hearts of individuals to bring the gifts in that we needed to finish the fiscal year for 2020 in a healthy financial position. And it presents us with the opportunity to begin the new fiscal year that we're 2 weeks into here with a healthy organization and able to proceed in a positive way financially. So that's my quick, brief update for you all. I'm going to pass the mic back over to Doug, but I'll be happy to answer questions in a few minutes when he's done sharing what he wants to, and then we'll open up the floor for questions in a few moments. So Doug, I'll give the mic back to you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. It's always interesting